coming up on
Under
today's
30
episode?
inches does not require inspections other than the final inspection. It still requires a permit.
From the first shingle to the final deck board, your home is your biggest investment. But in a world of rising costs and contractor red flags, how do you know who to trust? This is the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Hey, welcome to the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Your questions answered by the pros you trust, presented by Pro Exteriors. My name is Cole. I am the host on the show. And as you saw just at the very beginning, the teaser there, I had a conversation with Aaron Rogers. He is the owner and president of Pro Exteriors. He has over 20 years of experience in the exterior remodeling business. I had a conversation with him a while back all about how to build or remodel a deck, or having one built or remodeled. You know, it's springtime again. My family is looking for opportunities and excuses to spend more of our time outside, probably just like you and your family is. And so this episode is hugely practical if you are looking to have that old tired deck remodeled, or if you're looking to have one built from scratch. This episode will leave you feeling more empowered to tackle that project with confidence. So without further ado, let's hop into the conversation that I had with Aaron. I am going to play the role of the homeowner, and Aaron's going to play the role of the expert, because that is what we are in real life. So, Aaron, the question today is, where do I start if I want to build a new deck?
Great question. So typically when you're going to look at a deck project, you're going to want to look at kind of the area where you feel like it's the most appropriate. You're going to have some issues in most of the areas locally. You know, you really need to figure out what your setbacks are and what you can actually build. Doing that on the front end prior to meeting with a contractor is ideal for us. You know, we want to come out there. We want to give you everything you want. Every once in a while, we'll come up in a situation where somebody asks for something, and then we get further down the process and find out we can't actually build what they want. So knowing what you're able to build, knowing where your building setbacks are, trying to figure out what your current code is. I mean, most of these things your contractor can help you with, but these are kind of the things on the front end that really kind of give you a better idea as far as how far you can take the project.
So real quick, I want to jump in and in your simplest terms, what is the setback of a property?
So a setback, or some people call it a building restriction line. If you look at the border of your property and you come in, you know, it can be anywhere between, say, 20 to 30 feet. You know, you can't build anything within that line. No permanent structure can be built. They do allow you to do fencing and things like that right up to your property line because they're not considered a permanent thing. But the building restriction line, or your setbacks, are basically the imaginary line that you can't do anything in that area.
So to take it from like a baseball terminology, it would sort of be like the warning track,
Yep.
But it's invisible.
Correct.
Or it creates a buffer. And then would you suggest, as the homeowner, would it be also wise for me to check into any HOA restrictions prior to meeting with the exterior specialist?
100%. Dealing with an HOA and dealing with a property management company is something we do quite often. Most of your local communities where we are going to have an HOA. Most of them are run by a property management company, so a third-party company. They usually have forms in regards to what you are and are not allowed to do. Looking into that stuff on the front end. Again, the idea is trying to limit the amount of time that you, as the homeowner, and us as the contractor, kind of spin our wheels talking and designing a project before we find out that the HOA, the community, won't allow it anyway. So usually they can send you that form. You may or may not already have it. One of the other things with HOAs is they usually have a form that we have to fill out. We usually do that for the customer just to kind of simplify the process. But that's something typically you would only have access to. We typically don't have access to that.
Okay.
So any of those documents you can have in hand prior to meeting with a contractor. Again, just simplifies the entire process, keeps the ball rolling as quickly as we possibly can.
All right. So, in some of your experience, I imagine you've gotten to the end of some decking projects, and a homeowner, or maybe even one of our carpenters, has said, "Man, it would have been cool if we had done this."
Mm-hmm.
After kind of finding out more about how the deck is going to be used,
Yeah.
I know it probably could go without saying, but I want to say it anyway. Just what are some of the applications that you've seen that people use their decks for?
An extension of their dining room and their living room is probably the most used. With that being said, typically whatever size you have in your mind, it's not going to be big enough to do everything you want on that deck. We see quite often people are like, they have a certain budget they want to stick to, or they already have an idea of the size they want. They saw something on Pinterest or HGTV, or this is the size deck they had and this is what they're able to do with it. We see quite often that decks get real closed in real quick once you put, lounge furniture on it, maybe a dining room table, a grill. Yeah, they get small real quick.
And, I've seen decks, we just moved into a new house. We have a pretty basic deck on our back, in our backyard off of a slider, but I've seen super simple structures. I've seen ones that have all sorts of lighting and stuff built into it.
Yeah.
Before I even contact a company like Pro Exteriors, is it wise to have all the applications, all the things that I want to be able to do, to have that in mind, to kind of have a wish list written out?
Yeah. So having a wish list, Pinterest is a great resource for almost any sort of home project. You can get ideas as far as the overall look and kind of feel you want for the deck. Knowing somewhat what you plan on doing with the deck helps us because we know roughly how big it should be. If it's just you and your spouse, you don't need a ginormous deck. If you never entertain, again, a 4-person table versus an 8-person table, all of that information is stuff that we try to figure out during the initial meeting. But that information on the front end helps us to kind of navigate or kind of steer you in the right direction when it comes to size and products. Things like low voltage lighting, it's really good to know about those things on the front end because one of the things we have to look at is where's our existing electrical. Locating your sprinkler heads is always one of those things that people kind of forget about. Like we can build a brand new deck where there's not one currently, but most likely you're going to have sprinkler heads that have to get moved. So that's something that pops up often.
Okay. Just a quick plug to our audience. Pro Exteriors does have a Pinterest account, and we recently uploaded some different mood boards for some of some of our favorite material that we install for decks. So if you wanted to search at Pro Exteriors Delmarva, you can get some design inspo, as they say.
Shout out to Kara.
Yeah, shout out to Kara.
Phenomenal job, Kara.
Yeah. Okay, so I haven't even, at this point in our conversation, in this kind of role-playing thing, as a homeowner, I've not even contacted you yet. I've kind of put a list together. Maybe it would be wise to do a list of negotiables versus non-negotiables.
Yeah, wants versus needs. Like, this is what I absolutely need, and this will be nice to have if we can get that as well. So, a lot of it comes down to budget. A lot of homeowners don't feel comfortable sharing the budget with their contractor, especially, say, if they're interviewing multiple contractors. They don't want to give their budget to multiple contractors. But in all reality, if you feel really, really comfortable with a contractor, if he's asking all the right questions, give him your budget, because ultimately we're trying to maximize what we can give you for that budget. And, if we have that on the front end and we have a good idea as far as how you're going to use the space, we can really give you the best advice as far as like where you need to put that money. Where's the biggest, bang for your buck? So share your budget.
Yeah.
We're not going to try and maximize your budget. If you say like, hey, this is what I'd like to spend and this is as far as we can go, great. Then I'm going to try to stay in that, like what you would like to spend range. And then I'm going to give you options that would push you to that further end if you choose to go there. So
got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. So, I've got my list together of wants and needs, kind of have a budget number in mind. I've contacted a company to come out. What happens next?
So typically when we go and meet with a customer, we're going to go out, we're going to talk to them about, first is going to be the space. We're going to look at the space. We can typically get a rough idea about where our setbacks and building restriction lines are just by walking the property based upon kind of what the neighbors may have. Or if they don't have to worry about that, maybe they don't live in a development. We don't have to worry about that at all. I'm going to talk about what I think ultimately they have the options for. I'm going to listen to kind of how they respond and how they're going to use the space. And I'm going to say, well, in the past, projects like this typically have a deck of this size. I always suggest that people kind of look at the deck, figure out furniture wise. And before we put the stairs in a certain spot, let's look at the kind of the walkability, kind of the way you would design a kitchen. You're going to walk around furniture. You're going to walk from, the back door to the stairs. What do you have to walk around to get there? Entertaining is always one of those things. If somebody likes to entertain, we may consider bumping up the framing just a little bit. It's basically an interview.
Okay.
We want to know everything you're going to do on that deck. So we could talk about all the different things, all the different options, the types of decking, the types of railings, the lighting, the speakers, the stonework, the lattice work, all the individual options. Again, we're trying to give them a full picture of what they could have, and then we're going to try and kind of define that a little bit more before we start giving them estimates. We talk a lot about minimum code. The current code that we use here, the 2021 code, the minimum code for framing, specifically for decks, is not the best. I wholeheartedly believe that minimum code for decks is lacking seriously. So we like to really dive into the framing part and explaining exactly what minimum code is versus kind of how we do things. And then we can start talking about products and what's required and what's not required.
Okay. Well, you just mentioned products. In our roofing episode, we talked about how the shingles or the metal or the cedar was just one part of the whole roofing system. Yeah. But it's the part that gets talked about the most because it's the part you see.
Correct.
So I want us to shift a little bit to the decking materials.
Okay.
Let's start, actually, before we get to what goes on top of the deck, so the actual decking, what is typically used in the framing?
So your standard is going to be pressure-treated lumber.
Okay.
It's pretty much the gold standard for any exterior product is most likely going to be framed with pressure-treated lumber. They do have some other options. They actually have steel framing now that is, it's not new per se. It's not really used in this area, but it's got a little bit more engineered strength and you have a little bit more options with it. It's just not a readily available product here. So still kind of gaining some momentum there.
Yeah, that seems like that would probably be more of a niche thing. And I'm guessing that has to be manufactured for the specific application as opposed to pressure treated lumber where it can be cut on site or
not so much. It's okay. You can cut it with normal hand tools. It's just a specialty blade essentially.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of accessibility.
Okay.
There's nobody in our local area that's going to stock that. So, if you run short on something, it's got to be ordered. So, yeah.
All right. So pressure treated, most people listening or watching know what pressure treated lumber is. I would say most, but for the people that don't, pressure treated lumber is simply lumber that's been treated with pressure and with some sort of chemical, right?
Yep. It's an ACQ. So it's a copper based treatment to kind of make the board itself kind of weather resistant, we'll call it. Not weatherproof, weather resistant. It's still, you're going to have varying grades. Like this can go in the ground, this can't go in the ground. So yeah. So you've got some different grades, but overall, your standard pressure treated, you can get it at Lowe's, Home Depot, pretty much any supplier out there. Yeah, it's the gold standard. So.
All right. So I know what the framing's made out of. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the options when it comes to the decking, like the deck boards.
Okay.
Could you just run me through some of the options
Yep.
in no particular order?
Okay. So we'll start off with your wood options. So pressure treated decking is kind of your most basic grade that you're going to get. You can have a standard grade and a premium grade. Premium grade is just going to have kind of smaller knots. It's just going to last a little bit longer. It's got a different graining to it. And then staying in the wood, you can have cedar decking. You have some kind of hardwoods like ipe, some other Brazilian hardwoods that you can kind of that you can use. Teak,
Okay.
teak like is used on boats. Again, very very expensive, but still a wood option. And then from wood, you're going to go into your basic composites. Basic composites aren't quite as popular anymore, but they're essentially melted milk jugs and wood chips. So they tend to break down a little quicker than your cap composite. The step up from there would be the cap composite. Cap composite has a cap stock that goes around it. We compare it to like your car's dashboard, where it's all technically plastic, but the top part, the part you actually see and touch, that's the part where you really put the technology in because it gets beat up by the sun. Your wife may put their feet up on the dash. Your kids might put their feet up on the dash while you're driving. But yeah, so two different versions of that. You have one that's basically capped on three sides where the bottom is just your bare composite. And then you have the nicer brands have capped on all four sides. So it completely encompasses the board. And then from there, you can go into your PVC decking, which is going to be kind of your higher end. And then there's kind of some niche products from there. You've got some niche capped composites and some niche PVCs that are hyper specific to mimic another product. So there's some that try to mimic what looks like real actual hardwood that can get very, very pricey. But ultimately, what it comes down to is they're not necessarily any different. You're paying for the final product, the final aesthetic look. They still make aluminum decking. It's not really super popular. You can get concrete tiles. You can get ceramic tiles. I mean, there's really no limit. They make composite, what looks like composite pavers. It actually sits on top of a little grid on top of the framing, so you can walk out onto your brand new deck and it looks like you're walking on cobblestones. I mean, there's a lot of options, a lot of brands, a lot of options, a lot of price points.
What would you say the asphalt shingle of decking options would be? Because even within asphalt shingles, we talked about how there's different grades of it. So what is the kind of the equivalent, like the bread and butter of decking jobs that we do?
So cap composite is the market leader. Wood, pressure treated wood now is not what it used to be. So, we routinely rip off pressure treated decks that were built 30, 40 years ago that, have seen better days, but overall still have some life in them. The majority of the pressure treated decking that we install today, 15 years from now, is probably going to need to be replaced. It's younger lumber. It doesn't have the tighter grains. The ACQ treatment that they use doesn't last as long as the old stuff. The old stuff was arsenic based. This stuff is copper based. So the arsenic lumber lasts a lot longer. Surprisingly,
The people installing it, probably not as much.
But yeah, so that lumber tend to last a lot longer. And now the copper stuff has been around for probably about 20 years now. They completely switched the market overnight. But yeah, cap composite's probably the market leader. I don't know exactly what percentage of share it is, but standard composite's not really a thing. I think a lot of people over the last 20 years kind of got the standard composite and realized how quickly it deteriorates. It molds. It's not even remotely maintenance free, no matter what they sell it to you as. But it breaks down. It's still got a lot of organic compounds in it. So anything that has wood chips in it, it's going to have issue. It's going to break down. It's not going to have the same UV resistance as some of the other products. But cap composite, you still have a lot of products on the market that have a great price point. You don't have the maintenance. You don't have to pressure wash it, really. You don't have to stain it. You can do hidden fasteners, pretty simply. So, yeah.
I am wishing I'd had this conversation with you before our deck was built on our house. Viewer, listener, I do not live in the service area of Pro Exteriors, as I've mentioned before on a past episode. And so I didn't really have the option to use Pro Exteriors when we were having our house built. And yeah, like you said, some of our deck material, we have pressure treated lumber. You can already tell it's brittle, and it was installed 6 months ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's not encouraging. So I hear if you were redoing the deck at your house, would you be doing a cap composite of some sort?
Me personally, I don't like to wear shoes, so I'd be doing PVC. Cap composite,
Okay.
One of the big downsides to cap composite is in direct sunlight, it holds heat pretty good. So, so in direct sunlight, cap composite can be extremely hot.
Gotcha.
PVC is like walking on sand in the morning, and cap composite's like walking on sand in the middle of the day. So if you ever walked on the beach in the middle of the day, you're going to be doing that little high knee, pinky toe.
Yeah, scamper.
Yeah.
Yep.
On cap composite. So that's one of the questions that me personally, again, I don't do a lot of sales anymore, but when I do go and meet with customers, one of the first things I ask them is, do you like wearing shoes when you're home? Me personally, I'm a farm boy. I don't like wearing shoes. So yeah. So if you like wearing shoes, by all means. If you have young kids or you have a lot of animals at your house, I highly recommend paying for the PVC versus the cap composite, because your kids will thank you, your dogs will thank you.
That might be the pro tip of the episode so far.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. All right. So that we've covered the kind of the foundational pieces of the deck. We've talked about the decking material itself. What are some of the other accessories? Talk to me about the railings or lighting or those other things that we don't want to forget about.
Yeah. So, your frame is your basis for the entire deck. Your decking is kind of the second piece of that. And then railings, railings will kind of be the not necessarily the last piece, but one of the last crucial pieces. Anything over 30 inches requires railings. I think it's a little high if I have a 29-inch deck. If you take a step off of a 29-inch deck, you can hyperextend your knee pretty easily. So anything over 30 inches requires railings. Kind of the same thing with decking, where you have a whole slew of options. You can start with your pressure treated. You can go to cedar. You can go to Ipe. They have aluminum painted railings. They have aluminum pressure powder coated railings. They have stainless steel cable railings. They have vinyl railings. They have PVC railings. You have composite railings. I mean, the options are endless. And there's almost nothing that isn't available in our territory relatively quickly. So we're starting to see more and more options for railings in the past 5 or 6, 7 years or so than we've ever had before. We have more competitors in the space as far as more brands making the similar product with warranty, color options, and availability. So railings, I mean, again, depending on budget, you can go as far as you really want to. Glass railings are still fairly popular. I think most people think glass railings are amazing if you have a decent view until you have to clean them. Especially if you live.
A dog.
Yeah. So,
Small,
they come with engineer stamps. They're just as strong as the other railing options you have. But depending on where you live, you're going to be cleaning them often, which kind of loses the appeal after a while. Mm-hmm. And then from there, the rest of it's kind of more like your finished pieces. It's the decorative icing versus the main icing. So the trim that you use around the deck, the landscape fabric you use, the stones you use if you choose to do, to cover the ground underneath of it, lattice work. You have the kind of the cheap, when most people, when they hear the word lattice, are thinking of like the cheap, kind of like gingerbread style lattice that you buy in 4x8 sheets. We as a company don't use that stuff. It's a very unstable product. It's really hard to put a warranty on it. Even if you install it perfectly to the manufacturer specs, it always fails. We typically always push people towards like either a vertical or a horizontal PVC board. We can do a whole bunch of different options with that. But honestly, like we can frame off of that. We can put an access hatch underneath of it if you choose to have an access hatch. And, if you hit it with your weed whacker, it's not really going to do anything. You can pressure wash it without it breaking. You can hit it with your mower without it breaking. You can paint it. There's so many more options with PVC than there is with vinyl. And then, you can go with, you got all kinds of different sorts of lighting options and sound options. And, it's endless. So, yeah. So we started seeing more and more people kind of want like a grill inset. It was real popular for a while and then it kind of died off. And now we get more and more people asking for like a specific spot where we kind of bump the deck out to put their grill so they don't lose like the space on the deck for the living area.
Sure. And I would imagine we talked about HOAs at the beginning of this conversation, but
Yep.
When it comes to railings and that sort of thing, most homeowners associations are probably going to be particular about the color of railings, some of the material, more so than the decking itself.
Correct. Yeah, railings are a little bit more visible than the decking is. So in a lot of communities, they're just going to want you to match what's already kind of existing. Normally, there's going to be some sort of railings on the exterior of the house. So a lot of times the HOA will just stipulate that it has to match that. White vinyl railings is the kind of the gold standard. It's the most common, and it is so ridiculously cheap and quick to install that it really it makes sense. But yeah, HOAs kind of dictate almost everything if you live inside of a community.
Okay, so let's say I've had an exterior specialist or a sales guy come out, talk to my wife and I about all the different decking material options. They've kind of walked the property, got a good sense of what we're looking for. Before I move on in the process, where would you recommend, you just said you don't do sales a whole lot, but when you do, where do you recommend that homeowners spend the bulk of their money as far as a deck is concerned?
So I'm going to say this twofold.
Okay.
The frame itself is one of the most important parts because, 25, 30 years from now, you could replace the decking, you can replace the railings. We call that remodeling a deck. But if the framing shot, you got to replace the entire thing. So there are ways that you can have a beefier frame. You can increase the framing from 16 inches on center to 12 inches on center, which is going to give you a nice sturdy deck. It's going to kind of carry less load per joist. But they also make things like joist tape. The part of joists that typically fail prematurely are the screws that we use to fasten the decking. It creates a hole in the top of top of the joist. So when water gets in those holes over time, it can cause issues. So we pull decking off sometimes and we have rotten joists specifically from that. Water gets into the screw holes and the nail holes. So we use joist tape quite often on our decks to kind of help give that framing a kind of a little bit more longevity. It seals behind the nails and the screws when we install the decking. So I think it's very important to kind of start the deck off with a really, really good beefy frame. It's like the foundation of your house. You can have the nicest house on the block, but if the foundation's not great, why does it matter? And then the next part would just be the decking. You can spend a lot of money on a deck, and ultimately, depending on how you use it, you can regret really, really quickly on your decking choice. I think that everybody ultimately should consider PVC as their main choice for decking, and only consider bumping down to the cap composite if budget just truly won't allow for it.
Gotcha.
PVC is the best product on the market. It has the best usability, again, functionality, kids, animals, not having to wear your shoes outside, cleaning it. PVC by far is way better in every factor. But again, cost point, it's a much higher cost point.
All right. So after that initial meeting and an estimate's been provided to the homeowner, viewer, if you've missed our other episodes where we kind of go into depth about what to look for in an estimate or a contract, I encourage you to go back and watch that because we're not going to delve as much into it here. But after we've signed the contract, what happens after that on your end?
So we sign a contract, we get a deposit. We'll go ahead and we'll create we do plans in-house here, so we'll go ahead and get the plans drawn up. We typically submit plans to the homeowner for final approval, and then we're going to take those plans and we're going to submit them to the HOA. Once we get approval from the HOA, if you have an HOA, and then we'll submit them to either the county or the town.
Okay.
If you live in town limits, your town is ultimately going to be the one that's going to approve everything and most likely do the inspections. If you live outside of town, our county is who we submit it to. Anything under 30 inches does not require inspections. And this is a very important part to pay attention to. Under 30 inches does not require inspections other than the final inspection. It still requires a permit. So anybody who tells you if it's under 30 inches doesn't require a permit, that's not true. You just don't have the inspections like you do with decks that are over 30 inches. So we go ahead and we submit the plans. We draw plans for every deck, regardless if it's over or under 30. That's not just for us. That's for the homeowner. That's for our records and our crews to be able to build stuff the way we designed it. And then once we get our permits, we'll go ahead and call a misutility. If we're going to be digging in your backyard, we want to make sure there's no pipes or wires or anything else. And then basically we come out there and knock it out.
All right. So homeowner can expect at some point utility companies coming out, spray painting marks from the street back to where the deck itself is going to be?
So we usually tell them where we're going to be digging on the property, and they mark anything that's remotely close by. So if we're digging in the backside of your property, they're not going to mark the whole property. They're just going to mark likely the kind of the back corners and then the entire rear.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Okay, so the day of the deck install is here. Crews are showing up. What kind of equipment is showing up on the job site?
In most cases, it's just going to be manpower. It's just going to be guys with basic tools, shovels, sometimes post hole diggers. We do use an auger on certain occasions. It depends on how many footers we have. But the average deck, if it's say 6 to 10 footers, we're just going to go dig them by hand. Most of the time we dig and there's no issue whatsoever. But we don't really use like a bobcat or backhoe or anything like that. We're digging pretty much just post hole footers. So we don't have to dig out like an entire footer like you would with a regular foundation. But yeah, so we dig those out and then they have to get inspected before we pour concrete.
So for the most part, we're not having to worry about pulling up fencing or worried about sod or grass getting torn up by equipment being dragged back.
Not by equipment, but I will let you know that if you live in an area that has really nice grass and it stays pretty wet over the course of a week or say 2 weeks, if you have a larger project, the areas where we walk back and forth from the vehicle every day, the areas where we walk around the actual deck where we're building, that grass is going to take a beating. So it may not look great when we're done, but grass does grow back. So keep that in mind.
It's a good heads up.
Yeah.
Good heads up. All right. You mentioned that the footers have to be inspected. When we talked about all that goes into a roof, that was kind of typically a one day thing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that a deck is different, right?
Yeah. Average deck is going to be a week and a half, maybe. Again, if it's planned out accordingly, if you can kind of pre-plan your inspections, then it goes relatively quickly. Framing goes super, super quick. Decking, for the most part, goes super, super quick. It's all the little finishing touches that we put on there that ultimately make the difference.
Okay, so the day's arrived. The footers are dug. Is it just bags of Quikrete? Is that what
most of the time
using?
Yeah, most of the time it's just going to be 80-pound bags of Quikrete that we're going to mix right there in a wheelbarrow. We'll use fast set if we have a limited amount of time. We'll use a fast set concrete, but most of the time, standard 80-pound bag is all you need.
All right, and then inspection for the footers. Final inspection. Are there any other inspections throughout the process?
So if we're only doing a deck, it's typically going to be 2 actual inspections. So it'll be the footer inspection, and then your framing inspection and your final inspection can a lot of times happen at the same time. And that's because, it's not like a normal house where you have like insulation and electrical wires and all that stuff where the underside, the framing is exposed. So as long as they can access the framing, then typically they can look at the final product, make sure your railing heights are the correct height, make sure you have a graspable handrail in place, and check all the framing and connections and everything at the exact same time. So your typical deck is only going to be really 2 inspections. If it is a larger project and it's kind of broken down into multiple sections, like if it's a multi-tiered deck or a deck that has a little bit more structure, a second-story deck, we'll usually get the framing inspected before we put any final touches on it because it involves kind of just a little bit more structural, screws, fasteners, lag bolts, those types of things. So.
And I would imagine if there was any electrical work done, the electrician would have to
correct
handle the inspection on that end as well.
Yeah, and just, electrical inspections are completely separate from what we do. We can't call in for an electrical inspection. Only electrician can do that. So If you use a licensed electrician on your projects, they're the only ones who can pull the permit and get the inspection. We cannot.
All right, so fast forward the week or so, obviously weather permitting is done, the deck's done. I love it. My wife and I are sitting out on our deck the first evening. We're grilling up dinner. Our kiddos come out and we're eating dinner, and we realize that something doesn't look quite right. Could you talk to me a little bit about the warranty that comes with maybe the different warranties? Because I would imagine, much like roofing, there's warranties that come from the manufacturer and then also from the contractor itself.
Yeah. So we as a company pretty much cover our labor forever. We have a limited lifetime workmanship warranty. We put the limited in front of it because essentially we just don't want anybody else working on it. So if there's ever an issue, we're always going to come back. Anybody who's ever used us for a warranty issue will tell you that we always come back. And then as far as the manufacturer warranties, pressure treated lumber really doesn't have a warranty. Cedar doesn't really have a warranty. Almost all of your non-natural products are going to have a pretty good warranty in place. So you can call it a lifetime warranty. Again, lifetime is a weird word in the building trades. Lifetime doesn't mean forever. Lifetime means the lifetime of the product. So every product has kind of a different lifespan. Most of your better decking brands are going to come with like a 25-year warranty. Okay. Some of them might come with a 30-year warranty, but that warranty is going to be kind of broken down into a couple of different things. It's going to be broken down into kind of the color and the fade, and then it's going to be broken down into the product itself. So you can have products that basically deteriorate, but the color stays in place, and you can have products where the color fades away, but the product is perfect. So,
gotcha.
So yeah.
And I would imagine that that's something that the exterior specialist ought to go through in that beginning phase, right?
Correct.
As long as, but it's also good for the homeowner to be asking those questions.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So we've talked a pretty wide gamut of what to expect when we are getting a deck built on our house. Yep. We've talked about the foundation. We've talked about the different materials. We've talked warranty. We've talked the pre-planning and permits. What are just some of the things to be aware of with regards to the pricing or the cost of the deck or the quotes that I might receive?
Yeah. So, with previous episodes, we talked about pricing when it comes to roofing. And, we talked about the fact that the majority of the time when you get quotes for roofing, you're going to have a couple of guys that are pretty much in the same ballpark. And then you may have one outlier that's either super high or super low. With decking, it's a little bit different. So with building decks, let's say you get 3-4 quotes. It's not uncommon for all 3-4 of those quotes to be very, very different price-wise. You can always have guys that'll come out there and they'll quote you $6,000. The next guy may be $8,000. The next guy may be $12,000. The top guy might be $20,000. It's a lot different when you're trying to put that explanation on paper as far as what exactly goes into your price. I said before, like, the frame of your deck, if done right, can be remodeled multiple times over the years. It never really has to be upgraded, fixed, other than maybe, replacing a joist or something like that. But if properly done, that deck will stand the test of time. I wholeheartedly don't believe in minimum code. So the lowest guy and maybe even the second lowest guy, you're getting minimum code. If code says that I can use 2x8s on 16-inch centers, that's what they're going to go with. Whereas, a better contractor might say, okay, we don't believe in that. If the span chart says that I can take a 2x8 to 13'2", and our deck is 13'1", I'm not using a 2x8. I'm using a 2x10 or more. So those little things, although they seem, minimal on your end, they do add a considerable amount of cost. And then same thing with the decking products. You have brands that are on the very, very high end of the price point. And then you have brands that maybe don't have the same amount of marketing behind them that are still great products, but they're on the other end. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of brands in the middle. So even though you're, say, asking all four contractors to bid a 12-foot by 16-foot deck with, a cap composite and a white vinyl railing, it doesn't mean that all four quotes are quoting that exact same thing. If you look at vinyl railings, for instance, there are some companies that have, vinyl railings typically come with like an aluminum extrusion that goes in the top and the bottom. It's what keeps it rigid. There are some companies that believe you don't need it in the top and the bottom, so they only put it in the top because that's the area that people lean on. So a good vinyl railing brand is going to have the extrusion in the top and the bottom. The guy that's on the lowest he's not worried about that bottom, so he's going to have the brand that doesn't have the same amount of support. Guys that nail everything together versus screwing everything together. Guys that use, say, carriage bolts versus lag bolts. All of these things factor in to ultimately what the end price is going to be. Do I need 4 bags of concrete per hole, or do I need 3 bags of concrete per hole? Every one of those little things, the wording in the contract may appear to be the exact same wording, but the final product and the longevity of that final product are going to be vastly different. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, if you get 4 prices for what you feel like is the same exact product, you've really got to dive into the weeds as far as getting the details from your contractor. If you like this guy's price, but you feel comfortable with the other guy, I still would choose the other guy. Okay. If it's several $1,000s difference between the two, find out why. Has this guy been in business for 20 years and that guy's been in business for 5? This guy may be set up to go through another recession. This guy may not be. All of those things factor in. Is the one guy going to come back if there's ever a warranty issue? What's the relationship they have with the manufacturing of the decking and the railings? What's the relationship they have with their suppliers? I mean, there's so many factors that are going to final that price in. So I just say it with do not in any circumstance look at an apples to apples comparison when it comes to this stuff and think that price is the only factor, because it's really, really not.
Yeah, often you will get what you pay for.
I mean, in almost everything in life, you get what you pay for. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah.
So what I'm hearing is don't be afraid to ask questions. And in one of the previous episodes, you said a reliable contractor doesn't feel the need to hide anything.
No.
And so he or she ought to be forthright with what it is, the materials they're using or the processes that they use. And okay. All right. That's it for us on the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Hey, thanks for being here today. Would you please continue to help us get the word out about the show? The best way to do this is to leave reviews wherever you are watching or listening. Follow us on social media or simply tell a friend. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, before we go, we want to hear from you. What are some of the questions you have related to exterior home remodeling, the process involved, the options that are out there? You can send your questions to info@AskProExteriors and simply place "You Ask" in the subject. If you are facing an upcoming home project, we hope episodes like this help empower you to tackle them with confidence. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little bit of research can go a long way. Until next time, happy homeowning. The You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast is produced in-house by the Pro Exteriors team. Pro Exteriors is the exterior contracting division of Empire Construction Group, LLC. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. For more answers to your questions, please subscribe to this channel and podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Do you have an upcoming home remodeling project? Find more answers to your questions at AskProExteriors.com. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Would you please help us out by hitting that subscribe button? That would be awesome. Also, if you never want to miss another one of our uploads, please be sure to hit that notification bell. All right, thanks. See ya.